Hello, everyone, and welcome back from your lunch break. We are about to start the last session of today, which is going to be focusing on the business case for resilience. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now, and I will hand over the floor to Thomas Ribe, who is the Director of Investments at GAVA Capital, which is one of the partners of the Eco Microscale for Resilience Initiative. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Benedict. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's final session, the business case for resilience, a deep dive into successful approaches for and from the Caribbean region. This session will focus on the economic rationale and investment logic for financing climate-smart and resilient solutions, demonstrating how strategic investments in resilience can yield substantial economic, financial, and social benefits. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers, starting with Mr. Carter Brandon, Senior Fellow at the World Resource Institute. Carter brings extensive experience in the economics and finance of climate adaptation, built on a 24-year career at the World Bank. His work focuses on how countries and private institutions can manage risks and achieve resilient economic growth, including through nature-based solutions. Joining us today is also Ms. Malini Samtani. At IDB Invest, Malini leads climate change advisory services projects for financial institutions in the Caribbean, supporting banks to integrate climate-related risks, as well as generate climate investment opportunities. She recently published a paper identifying the financial benefits of investing in resiliency measures in residential and commercial buildings in Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, and Jamaica, and is keen to continue to showcase the business case of investing in climate change adaptation. And last, but definitely not least, we have Ms. Daisy Martinez Baron. As the regional program leader at CIAT, Daisy drives efforts to build climate resilience in agricultural sector of Latin America and the Caribbean region. Her work focuses on climate-smart agriculture solutions that benefit both farmers and the broader economy, particularly in the LAC region. And so just a reminder to the audience, there will be a Q&A session at the end, so please do write any questions you may have in the chat. And now, Carter, the floor is yours.
Carter, I think you have to unmute yourself.
There we go. Anyway, good to be here. Thanks, Tomas. Thanks, Benedict. Thanks, everybody, for organizing the session. I was able to join some of the sessions this morning, and one of the messages that came out loud and clear over and over was the importance of collaboration, whether you're a development bank, whether you are a government agency, or whether an NGO. The topic of resilience is very cross-cutting. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about the economics and finance from my perspective. I'm just starting work in the Caribbean, but I work a lot around the world, particularly in Africa, in what I call the bookends. The bookends are both top-down and bottom-up planning. Top-down meaning primarily ministries of finance, the financial sector in general, and the supervisors, and the bottom-up are the developers, the NGOs, the local communities. Going back 5 years, it was very clear that there was underinvestment in climate change adaptation. And it was also clear that the economics didn't support that the economics were very strong for investing in adaptation, but it wasn't happening. So there's immediately the question of why and what to do about it. So that gets to this bookends approach. You can look top down, as I said, ministries of finance. Ministries of finance, I'll get into it very briefly, need to see climate change and climate resilience not just as a physical problem, not just flooding, not just storms, not just droughts. They need to see it as a macroeconomic growth, fiscal, trade, inflation, debt, financial sector issue. These are their variables. This is their world. When they see what we call those macro critical risks, they will do more about it, and I'll get into that. And then bottom up, there's more benefits to adaptation than most developers even realize. And so we've developed a methodology, and combining these two is powerful. So if you take anything away from my presentation, it's to work both top down, bottom up to make, I'm going to even use the phrase, to lean in. It's not enough to have your project. You need to engage with government. You need to engage with infrastructure utility companies, with communities, with banks, all around, because it's not clear that any one group owns the adaptation agenda. It's only by working together. Anyway, top down, I don't have data for the Caribbean. As I told you, I work a lot in Africa, but there's a very clear message in this chart. What is the impact of GDP by climate by 2050? Impact of climate on GDP. We see where the red circle is. GDP will be 10 to 12% lower in a lot of countries, 6 to 8% lower. This means that countries are poorer than they are today. Now, the arrows on this graph show how much that GDP loss can be reduced through adaptation. Obviously, you can't adapt your way completely. There's always damage. The impact on growth in some of these African countries will still be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8% of GDP. What does that tell us? If you're losing 5% of your GDP, but you could even invest 1% of your GDP to reduce that loss, it makes sense. So it makes sense, and this gets back to my initial point. There's underinvestment, but it's not happening, and the economic case is very strong. Okay, now we go to the bottom up. What do we know about actual projects? We know that the benefit cost ratio, which is exactly what it sounds like, the ratio of the total benefits of projects over how much they cost, is around 5 to 1 in many areas. 5 to 1 is insanely profitable, more than 10% return, 12% return. It's 100% return. Strengthening early warning systems, infrastructure resiliency. So again, we know that the economics line up. So the question is, why isn't it happening? Okay, so now next topic for the short presentation is the triple dividends. We looked at what are all the benefits of investing in adaptation. And we came up with this triple dividends logic. This goes back about 6 years. It was done with LSE in London, London School of Economics, SOAS, WRI. 3 categories. If you invest in resilience, you avoid the losses or the damages you would otherwise have. So let's take Dominica, because you've had terrible hurricanes. If you had building standards and buildings designed to withstand winds, and the hurricane came through and you didn't lose your buildings, that's an avoided loss. Very important. That's what defines resilience. But we also have a category we call induced economic benefits. And this is super important because what resilience does is it reduces risk in the economy. It reduces the cost of doing business. It reduces the cost of capital. It reduces the transaction costs to get financing because there is less risk. This generates greater investment, and we've seen it over and over and over. So what's important about this is simply reducing risk in the economy has a benefit, even if the storm never happens. Even if the extreme event doesn't hit, you've already got the benefit because you reduce the cost of doing business. And that's super important. And then the third category is what we call the social and environmental benefits. This is particularly large for NBS, nature-based solutions, which again, very important in the Caribbean. So there are non-market benefits. You get these benefits: better wetlands, better biodiversity, better coastal protection, even if you don't have that storm. the ecosystems will respond. So the importance of this approach is dividends 2 and 3. Turns out that they're quite big. They benefit even if the disaster doesn't happen. So I'm going to show you one quick slide. We looked across wildfires, heat, flooding, stormwaters, drought. And this is a chart. I won't go into details, but if you just look at the colors, they're all over the place. What this means is there's no simple pattern for triple dividends. It just means that every adaptation project we ever look at has all three. And so if you don't look at all three, you're underestimating the benefits. Okay, so now, and basically water projects, again, very important in the Caribbean, have some of the highest second and third dividends because they rely on nature, water quality, water quantity. Okay, so that's the context for looking at projects. Now let's look at it from the private sector point of view. Where are their markets? And this was a study done by a group, just came out this year, called the Global Adaptation and Resilience Initiative, GARI, Gary, looked at not just adaptation resilience projects, but what they call adaptation solutions. And they identified about 900 companies around the world that specialize in adaptation solutions. And these are the things they do. And these are the areas where there are cash flow. Super important across agriculture, real estate, water supply, IT, information, infrastructure, energy, health. So in all these areas, there are opportunities. Now let's look at where they found it. This is sort of the distribution of these projects that these 500 or 900 companies work in. A lot in materials, design, building standards, processes, supply chains. No surprise, that's where the private sector is very concerned. A little bit next on utilities, which is the basic power and water. And after that, it gets pretty small. So we see that in a lot of areas that are not private sector supply chains, the private sector is not there. It requires public collaboration. Okay, now just look at nature. Nature projects. Most of them, the green bar is primary focus, second bar is secondary focus. Most of the projects that we did a large survey across Latin America and the Caribbean are in the water sector. After that, in housing. Okay, again, no surprise. But who did these projects for water? Not the private sector. Only 6% of all these projects, even including housing and transport, were private company or private foundations. And I forget exactly, but I'm sure half of that was foundations. So the private sector is not in the nature-based space yet. Again, requires collaboration. So I just have a couple minutes. Let me speed along. So if these investments aren't happening, why not? Is it the nature of the investments or the enabling environment? And we know the investments have certain challenges for the private sector. They don't generate cash flow, they're long-term, they're small, they're complex. But we also know the enabling environment is difficult. Lack of data, poor institutions, lack of finance. So my answer here is governments need to look at both, but only governments can improve the enabling environment. So that's the job of governments. Private sector needs to lobby with governments to improve the enabling environment, but they also need to look at project design. Good project design addresses those concerns. They're not too long-term. They're not too small or too big. They actually improve the tax base by reducing risk and improving real estate values or improving trade. They generate cash flow. So there are examples. And so that's the good news. And again, just to wrap up, investors need to lean in because they can't do it alone, given the importance of the enabling environment. Governments, but especially utility companies, need to engage because they can't do it alone, but they can lend their credit worthiness to projects. Donors can help on the enabling environment. Nature should be incorporated early in infrastructure. And finally, I think what I call top-down, bottom-up, combining them is powerful. So that's my key message. I hope you remember the last one. You got to think both big picture, top down and bottom up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carter, highlighting that urgent need for increased investment in climate adaptation and nature-based solutions in the Caribbean, and emphasizing that collaboration between governments and the private sector is essential to overcome institutional, financial, and information barriers. So we'll start now with the next presentation from Ms. Malini Santani.
Hi, Tomas. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. I hope you can see me okay. And bear with me while I share my screen. All right, excellent. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. And Carter, it was so nice to hear about the top-down and bottom-up approach. My part of the presentation will focus more on the bottom-up, so I think it'll complement quite nicely. But let me start with just giving you an overview on IDB Invest. So I'm a climate change officer at IDB Invest, and I'm sure you've all heard of the Inter-American Development Bank Group. And so within the group, there are three windows. IDB works with governments to advance those sustainable development goals and climate action. Then there's IDB Invest that works with large commercial banks and corporations, and IDB Lab, who's co-sponsoring today as well and works with smaller companies and startups on technologies. And so at IDB Invest, we work with the private sector. And the argument here is that sustainability is no longer a matter of corporate responsibility like it was 10 years ago. Now it's part of the core business. And there's so many risks involved that businesses not only need to be sustainable, but they need to be resilient as well in the face of climate change. So today's focus is on resilience, but I feel that whenever we talk about climate change, typically and more often than not, our minds go immediately to decarbonization and lower emissions. And one of the main messages that I think is important to take away from this session today is that when we think about climate change, we need to think about two aspects. One, indeed, in order to prevent the worst impacts of climate change, we need to focus on mitigation, on emissions reduction. So that's when you hear about renewable energy, energy efficiency, electromobility, and so forth, and those are critical. However, the other piece is that climate change is already happening. And that's what we call, when we work on interventions to prevent those worst impacts, when there's floods, when there's heat, when there's drought, that's called adaptation and resiliency. And so as a company, you go back and you look either in your home or at your corporation and you say, okay, if I'm in Barbados, what is the specific climate threat here? If I'm in agriculture, how does this affect me? If I have a building, an office, how does this affect me? And what can I do so that those losses don't have to be that large? So that's adaptation in a nutshell. And Tomas mentioned earlier that we published a paper that I think will complement this session very nicely because it shows those numbers. It shows the numbers that show the business case for investing in resiliency. So the paper was called Interventions to Increase Climate Resilient Investments in Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, and in Jamaica. And what we did is we went and we looked in these three countries. What are the main climate risks and how much does it cost? What are the intervention measures and how much does it cost to invest in them? So we found that in general, no surprise here, businesses will need to prepare for the increasing impact of climate change, right? We found that there's going to be a 5%, and I'm talking about just in the next 5 years, there's going to be a 5% increase in peak hurricane wind speeds and increased frequency of intense hurricanes. Then we saw increasing trends in 1 and 5 day extreme rainfall, likely to result in flooding. At the same time, a 7% reduction in precipitation, resulting in drought, regional sea level rise, as you know very well, and temperatures have already risen by 1 degree and will continue to rise by another 0.8 degrees, right? So heat, it's not only daytime heat, but also at nighttime, temperatures aren't cooling as much. And what does this mean? This means that in Jamaica alone, just as an example for Jamaica, hurricane wind annualized losses have averaged 215 million. And from flooding, the annualized losses are 20 million. And because it's so hot, people are turning on their air conditioners more, which means it's more expensive for people and for businesses and for companies. And that's another 8 million a year throughout Jamaica, as one example. But it doesn't need to be this way. These losses don't need to be this high. We now know what the impacts are, and we can invest in resiliency measures. So the study came up and said, okay, well, then what are these resiliency measures that we need to invest in? And this slide has a selection of some of the things project developers, construction companies, and retail providers can offer and do. And that's, for example, under wind mitigation measures, you can look at things like roof clips and ties, impact resistant doors and windows, minimum eaves on buildings. For heat, it's getting hotter. Simple things like having solar shades can really cool the temperature. Having thermal radiant roof barriers. In the case of drought, on-site water storage tanks, rainwater harvesting, and in the case of flooding, elevating the structure, having flood doors, having permanent flood barriers are all going to be critical moving forward to reduce those losses. So now, at this point in the study, we know what those interventions are, but we had to go find out how much do they cost and does it really make sense to invest in them, because sometimes it can be expensive. And what we found is that overwhelmingly it makes sense, because just with a 1 to 2% premium on the construction cost of the property, whether that's an office space or an SME retail unit or a housing unit, just by investing 1 or 2% more, you're actually saving 30 times the amount you invested over 5 years. And so we looked at each intervention, the cost of that intervention, given these climate events, how much are we actually saving? And you can see on the very last column on the right, sometimes they are negative, but overwhelmingly, it goes up from 5, 6, 20, and up to 30 times in savings. And so this means that there's a market for this, as Carter was saying earlier as well. There's a market for adaptation and resiliency solutions locally. We need to upskill. We need to offer not only the products, but also the services that come with that. And so there's an economy that's starting to come around resiliency. So we need, just in the building sector alone, we need the planning, design, and construction. So project developers, architects, construction firms, then all of the retail units that are providing these solutions. So the flood doors, the energy efficient cooling, all of the things we talked about, we need SMEs and retail units. They're going to have to provide more of this, right? Because the demand is on the rise. And all the services, mapping, understanding the software technology to know what the issues are all going to be needed. And also the financial sector. Financial institutions will now need to finance this entire industry. So there's really a market coming around. There's an opportunity to be captured here. And this is something we are working on at IDB Invest in two ways. One, we're working on creating, well, actually in many ways, but in one of the things we're doing is we're working on creating some of these guides around resiliency. So how does a sector know exactly what they need to do and how they can protect themselves from the worst impacts of climate change? And on the other side, we work with banks and financial institutions to see what they can do to know what's in their portfolio to finance more green, finance more resiliency, but also do climate risk assessments, because when you know where the risk is, then you can finance to mitigate that. And so one of the products that we're rolling out and piloting in the Caribbean is this idea of a 3-pillar solution for blended finance, where we work with commercial banks to, one, the financing we provide through concessional resources will go from a use of proceeds perspective, has to go to green investment. So that can be renewables, electromobility, but also resiliency financing, as I mentioned. And then we set a portfolio milestone. because we're providing technical assistance, but also blended finance solutions, so concessional financing. And we say, okay, over the course of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, how can we help you to increase your climate finance? Because the market is there. So we want to support you to capture that market. And the third piece is increasingly now there's a demand and it's moving towards a requirement space to have sustainability and climate reporting. But in order to do that reporting, you have to know as a bank what's in your portfolio. And so we're supporting banks to do climate risk assessments within their portfolio so that they can find out where the risks are, then finance to mitigate those risks, and also report. So that's essentially how the real sector and the financial institutions work together towards a greener and more resilient economy. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Malini, for highlighting the importance of promoting climate resilient investments in the Caribbean and emphasizing the business opportunities for companies in resiliency products and services. Thank you so much. We'll now start with the next presentation from Daisy Martinez Baron.
Thank you, Thomas. Let me share my screen. Please let me know when you see it and if it is in presentation mode.
We can see it now.
Okay, good. So thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. This has been a very interesting conversation, and also listening to the speakers before me. I think that we are in a very interesting discussion, and we're about to start also talking about more about the role of the business case for resilience. I'm going to show an example of what we have done in terms of this work on resilience and finance in the financial sector. But first, just to let you know, we are in a research center, the Alliance of Biodiversity SIA. These are the research areas that we work in and trying to come up with the nexus between agriculture, environment, and nutrition. And this is a way to address the complex of the systems, the agri-food systems that we have, and the challenges that we have in terms of climate change, biodiversity, and others. We work around the globe. We have a very important focus in the Americas, and actually we are each time more working in the Caribbean. But then, as you all have heard, we have this worrying trend of increasing the global temperature change, and we have been feeling that even in a more faster pace in the last decades. And this has been reflected in extreme weather, extreme heat, heavy rainfall, drought, fire weather, ocean warming, acidifying, and losing oxygen, and all those kind of things. And in the Caribbean, we know that we have many of those as well. And this is the framework that we have at the end in terms of the challenges that we have in terms of climate change. So we have been working with the Scale for Resilience and other initiatives in the framework of nature-based solutions in linking the work of climate smart agriculture in terms of addressing how we, from the agri-food systems, can actually be more prepared to the climate change environmental variability impacts that we are having, but also reconciling the shared benefits that we have in terms of ecosystem-based approaches, and also the work that we do in terms of the society implications that we have in terms of how we address adaptation, mitigation, and food security. All these three goals, looking at the short and the long term. Then we develop a portfolio of climate smart options. So looking at livestock, agroforestry, agriculture, soil and water, integrated food energy at different scales. So not looking only at the farm level, but also how those implications, those different practices have implications in different scales at the landscape level, but also at the enabling environment level, looking at the plot from landscape and higher levels of work. But then the climate smart agriculture as an approach within the nature-based solutions, we have been working to put it as a business models to inform investments and actions to enhance resilience. And how we have been doing that. So putting a framework in terms of looking at the science evidence that we have from the research, agricultural research for development side, but then working together with financial institutions, public sector, and all these different organizations that are looking on how to use that science evidence to actually put it into public policy, but also into private programs that we can actually support and inform. So donors, investors are always asking, where should I put my resources? What are the potential risks involved? And how do I know that it works? So in order to answer these kind of questions, we have put together a framework in which we develop a climate risks and portfolio design. So understanding what are the impacts, but then what are the different solutions that together can actually address those impacts. Then looking at economic analysis by portfolio. So looking at cost-benefit analysis at each practice, what does it, how much does it cost? What are the benefits, the co-benefits of those practices within a specific crop or production system? And then looking at the financial indicators. And also developing a monitoring and evaluation system that contributes to national and global goals, and also the way to understand how those different portfolio of practices are actually enhancing the resilience and adaptation indicators. So we used three main aspects to prioritize this work. So this climate smart agriculture indicators. So we have the food and nutritional security, also adaptation and mitigation. Then we analyze the cost and benefits, looking at each of the costs, how much does it cost and what are the social, environmental, and economic benefits. And then the barriers and opportunities to actually implement and scale those different portfolios. And that gives us our climate smart agriculture in the investment portfolios that consider different multidimensional aspects in terms of social, cultural, environmental, economic, policy, institutional, and education, also in terms of the information and capacities that we should have in the sector, but also in the context that we are working on. Looking at the climate hazards, the production systems, all of this through a participatory process. It's not us from the research or from the institutions saying what to do, but also harvesting the knowledge, the information that we have from the key stakeholders, beginning from farmers, men, women, youth, but also local organizations, local associations, cooperatives, and so on, that are actually dealing with these challenges every day. And of course, the microfinance institutions and institutions that represent the financial sector. We have done this for different countries, implementing and trying to understand what are the different opportunities for climate smart agriculture in terms of implementing in an integrated portfolio, including different countries from the Caribbean as well. And in the case of the Jamaica, we did a series of analysis in which we understand what were the different investment portfolios, but also in order to implement those investment portfolios, we already developed extension manuals. So that put into practice how to implement this and how much does it cost. Also understanding how will those different portfolios of practices will actually be implemented in a specific crops and systems. And then we have also been able to support and provide scientific evidence to integrate it into the design of financial services for smallholders or the smallholder farmers in Latin America. So we provided technical assistance for an impact fund, an adaptation fund. So the idea was to assess the microfinance institutions and smallholder farmers so that they could apply for a climate smart adaptation fund in different countries in Latin America. So what we did was actually to understand the key challenges from the microfinance institutions, but also develop these portfolios that I was mentioning about. Then looking not only at the microfinance perspective, but also going and talking to the smallholder farmers to understand what are the challenges in connecting the financial products that they have access to and the climate smart practices and technologies they wanted to implement in order to increase their climate resilience and adaptation. So this is an overview of the methodology. So we went from the field data collection to modeling and to design the different portfolios and develop the cost-benefit analysis, the monitoring and evaluation framework. And some of the results that I'm going to share. So this is an example of the prioritization of the characterization that we did for each one of the countries. So which were the main production systems that they had in the agricultural sector, the loan portfolio size of the microfinance institutions that we interviewed, and also the size of the farmers' land by each of the countries that also are very important in terms of understanding the opportunities to get financial access and for different products. And also we assessed the different climate impacts, the climate hazards that each or one of the production system had. Also, we prioritized some of the adaptation measures, and we looked at how those adaptation measures had an effect in terms of the yield and income, but also avoiding losses for each one of the crops and in each one of the countries. So that also give an overview of what type of challenges you are facing and how to actually address those. And then we came up with the different measures. So the portfolio of measures, understanding which were going to be the potential benefit of each one, and doing a financial analysis in terms of understanding what were the different financial indicators for each one of the practices for a certain crop. And as you can see here, we also developed the monitoring and evaluation frameworks. One in terms of a very basic scenario in which the microfinance institutions didn't have a much technical capacity to actually go in and verify that the different measures were being well implemented, and also monitor the progress in terms of resilience and adaptation indicators. So that's a basic scenario for monitoring and evaluation. And then we had also developed for each one of the portfolios an optimal scenario with more technical and technological tools to do this follow-up and evaluation. And then we also evaluated the internal rate of return for the different adaptation measures in each one of the crops for each one of the countries. And we found a very general overview is that all options are profitable. The infrastructure options will cover more, the loan and additional costs more faster than the others. Irrigation options, internal rate of return is over 50, so it's very high also, indicating high profitability. But these are mainly related to the efficiency in water use. And then the management options also showed a high internal rate of returns as well. Some of the key messages just to wrap up. So one of the first one, bridging sustainability and profitability through science. I think that working together with science based information, and also the ones that are actually making that evidence and that information practical is key, so that we actually align different efforts and move towards more impact and sustained impact as well. Empowering financial institutions for climate action. Financial institutions are in a unique position to advance sustainable and climate smart agriculture. They have insights into climate risk faced by producers and can support the risk mitigation strategies as well as evaluate the cost and benefits. And this is why working together with different organizations and making a way to collaborate is key with the financial sector. Unlocking climate smart financial mechanisms. The current landscape offers a significant opportunity to design innovative financial mechanisms that integrate climate change adaptation mitigation and aligning financial returns with sustainable practice. And finally, scaling impact through collaboration. Transforming food systems towards sustainability is achievable by uniting efforts across sectors. Collaborative development of tailored and science-driven financial mechanisms is key to achieving large-scale impact involving resilient food systems. At the end is what we all are aiming for. So thank you very much. I hope get it on time.
Perfect, Daisy. Thank you so much for showing the importance of developing science-based, climate-smart financial mechanisms to bridge sustainability and profitability in agriculture, and emphasizing the role of financial institutions in promoting climate resilience and adaptation for smallholder farmers in Latin America and the Caribbean. I'm opening now the floor to questions from the audience. I see there are no questions for now, but even if you have any questions, please go ahead. Otherwise, I'll start with a question. We're also running out of time, so in the interest of time, I'd like to ask all of the panelists. I have a few questions, but one I'd like to answer for me. How can institutions, private institutions, balance risk, profitability, and impact when financing resilience projects? If you can give me just your brief thoughts.
Very happy to start. So this is where some of the frameworks that are now coming out are going to be very useful, because the first thing is that you need to know where the risk is, right? And so if you're able to identify where those risks are in the face of climate change. So for example, there is heat, which assets will be hit first? How is it affecting your business continuity? How is it affecting your supply chain? Or there's flooding. How is it affecting your assets? How is it affecting your people's ability to come to work? Then you identify the risk in the context of a financial institution, because I know there's a lot of banks in the audience. You would do the same thing for your portfolio. And once you know where the risks are, then you can also know what you need to finance to balance those risks. So really it comes down to being able to do climate risk assessments, either on your own assets or on your balance sheet, on the portfolio companies that you're investing in, and then look at how you finance adaptation solutions and resiliency solutions to offset that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Malini.
If I could jump in, maybe. I think the distinction you made, Malini, was good between a private company's own assets and their operations. So I think for their own assets, I mean, they just have to figure out the risk. Are they going to get flooded? Are they going to, the wind going to blow off the roof or whatever? They just have to do that, and they can talk to whoever they have to. But where it gets more interesting is if their operations are threatened by water supply or electricity supply or a port, things that they use daily, but they're outside their control. That's where they really have to step up and talk to others about, we recognize the risk, we share a risk, the risks are, physical, financial, what are we going to do about it? And that's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, in my case, I don't have much to add because at the end, if you translate that to agricultural sector, no, it's the same. So what are the inputs that we need for producing, no, the food that we all eat, and how we can make more efficient use of those resources, and how climate we will actually prevent the producers and the private sector that is in the agribusinesses to use those inputs to actually produce the different food that we use, that we consume. So yeah, I mean, in line with what the other panelists mentioned. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much for all your answers and your views. Thank you so much, Carter, Malini, Daisy, for highlighting the urgent need for increased investments in climate adaptation and nature-based solutions, specifically in the Caribbean. The significant business opportunities for SMEs in climate-resilient products, and the critical role of developing science-based financial mechanisms to bridge sustainability and profitability. And as we conclude this final session, I wanted to leave you with a key message. Building resilience through strategic investment isn't just about weathering the storm. It's about creating a stronger, more sustainable future for our economies and communities. The Caribbean has unique challenges, but also unique opportunities. And by continuing to finance and scale adaptive solutions, we can ensure long-term growth, reduce risk, and create value for all. Ourselves at Gawa Capital, we're launching a Quali Fund in the next couple of months. It's a climate change adaptation and mitigation fund with a key focus in Latin America and the Caribbean region. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tomas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sharice Trotman and I work with IDB Lab. I'm supporting the Apple team here today. And we're going to go to the last part of our agenda here, where we're going to give spotlight to someone who would have benefited directly from the Acro Micro Scale for Resilience initiative. So as part of the Acro Micro Scale for Resilience initiative, we are excited to highlight one of our key knowledge sharing and learning programs, and that is the Women in Resilience Finance Mentorship Program. This initiative is designed to support the empowerment and professional development of women leaders in the resilience finance space. And to give you a first-hand perspective, we've invited a participant from last year's cohort to share her experience and share how the program has benefited her institution. Therefore, it's my pleasure to introduce Viviana Salinas Laneo, I hope I pronounced that correctly, advisor to the executive director at Finca Peru, with over 12 years of experience in commercial banks in Peru, 2 years at Grameen Foundation, and 8 years at Finca Peru. Ms. Salinas has made tremendous contributions to the financial inclusion and social performance. Therefore, I give you the floor, Viviana.
Thank you, Sharice. Can you share the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So I know you're tired. We're at the really end of the conference, but I did want to share with you the experience, what has meant for me and for Finca Peru, the mentorship program that we had last year. Next slide, please. Next one. Okay, so just to let you know a little bit about Finca Peru, it was founded in 1993. We're not a very big institution, but we have a portfolio of $8 million, and we work with 11,000 clients, basically in the highlands of Peru. And we work with 82% women, 68% of our clients are in rural areas. And Finca Peru was founded by my grandparents that are there in the picture, and my mother, so the organization is really special to my heart. Next one. So just to let you know a little bit about the program, it went from August to October last year. We had 8 sessions. It was very enriching because of the experienced facilitators that we had, but also because there were 10 of us who came from 6 different countries in Latin America. And also we had a buddy system. So we were paired with one of the other 10 women, and we were able to discuss the learnings and share experiences, but also it's very special to hear from one another. I think that was the main learning for each of us. And when we talk about main learnings about women in resilience finance, or what we wanted to achieve with the mentorship programs, and I'm sure you've heard about all of these learnings today, basically is that climate change is a serious threat everywhere, and we have to be aware of it. It's important to do adaptation financing, which I've heard has been discussed in the previous sessions, rather than only mitigation. We shouldn't wait for our clients, which are very vulnerable, to experience these climate change events, but for them to be prepared. And then, of course, gender inequality worsens with climate change. This was a learning or something new for most of us. Most of us work mainly with women, as Finca Peru has over 80% women, but we weren't really aware of how climate change makes inequality, gender inequality, even worse. So we have to really work more with women. And also an interesting learning was that we really need data to develop financial and non-financial products, which was also mentioned in the session before. But how important is non-financial products beyond financing, how we understand the needs of the women, the needs for agriculture, for their agricultural businesses, but also talking about health, talking about trainings and different things that are non-financial. Next one, please, Charisse. And what were the benefits for Finca Peru? I wanted to share a bit with you. I think it's important about how we got the commitment from the board. Our board is very strong, and most of them have social performance in their experience, but also how this actually made us create more awareness with them, because we shared the information that we received at the program. Also with management, we have been working with Yapu Solutions actually to get information from our clients, but we know that we have to do more, not just have information, or we have to do more with the data that we have and what is available. Also, we have been developing more climate change education for our clients, like shown in the picture, showing what happens with our women in different regions of Peru, and again, especially with women, and how we try to develop these trainings, especially for them. And another benefit was that we discovered that we're on the right track. We are doing things, and something that was also mentioned in the mentoring program is sometimes we don't think we're doing a lot with climate change if we don't really have a green product to show, but actually we are. And I think most of our institutions are already helping our clients to have a better resilience with climate change. Next one, please. And this is the last one. What are the next steps for us? We just started with our carbon footprint. We've done 2023, and now we're finishing 2024. We want to develop our SARAS in Spanish, the Environmental and Social Risk Management System, which we're going to start with a consultant next month. And then after that, we would like to to define better green products. With Yapu Solutions, we do have the information that around 35% of our loans to our agricultural clients are for green products, given the taxonomy of the app, but we don't really differentiate them. We don't really give a better interest rate or better conditions for the loans. They're the same for the ones that are green products or not, because of the investment that the clients do. And finally, we were looking at agricultural insurance for our clients. Unfortunately, Peru is not so developed in these themes as other countries in Latin America, and agricultural insurance is really high. We actually did a study to find out how much it would cost for our clients, and it's still with We have support from the environmental ministry in Peru, but even then, it costs 70 soles, which is 20 US dollars per month per hectare or 1,000 meters of land. So actually, it's really expensive for one of our clients to get to this insurance. But we'll keep trying, and we'll figure out ways to help them affront these climate change events. And that's it. I don't know if you have any question. I really recommend, if when you get the chance, to form part of this mentorship program as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Viviana, for sharing your inspiring journey and how the mentorship program has impacted not only you, but your institution and the persons that you're working to help. And our mentorship program will be open soon, again, for any financial institution in the Caribbean region. And we're giving priority to the eco-micro institutions. So we're strongly encouraging you to please apply. And we're specifically going to be targeting mid-level female managers to participate. The application will begin around mid-November, so please look out for that. And I will remain open for about 2 weeks. And after the application process, about 15 to 20 candidates will be chosen based on their applications and background to join the program. And the program itself will run from the end of November to the end of March. We're still in the process of putting it together, but we'll be sharing details very soon. So we're asking you again to stay tuned and keep an eye out for our future updates. I would say follow our page. We would have promoted a lot of this event on our social media pages. And as well, you have the contacts. I will put them in the chat right now of Benedict, Autumn, or myself, Cherise Trotman, and we will get those details to you. Now we transition to closing remarks. And on behalf of IDB Lab, IDB, I would just like to thank everyone who would have participated in today's sessions. I think we learned a lot and the discussion is very fruitful. I think what I did, I wrote one word from each session throughout the day. So from session one of the things that stood out was that context matters and is really important. Even though for the Caribbean region, as Mr. Anderson was saying, we are takers, it's still important to understand the context of what we're operating in when we're trying to talk about the regulatory landscape that we're working across. Then when we speak about session 2, what stood out to me there was when we talked about maybe not sticking to traditional approaches. And that was when we heard from our eco-micro institutions, and that people-focused is where we need to spend and tailor a lot of our programming or a lot of our products. And then for the third session, we talked a lot about the digital tools, but important to digital tools is the idea of accessibility and meeting people where they're at and bringing them along on the digital journey when we're talking about being accessible to all the MSMEs, the farmers, etc., who are looking to us for the access to the financing that they need. And then to our fourth session, I really want to thank our participants there because they put what we're speaking about into application. What is happening on the ground? What are the examples? And I really appreciate the examples that IDB Invest gave about what's happening in Jamaica and some of the other Caribbean countries. And now, with all of that together, we want to just remind you that this session will be available, the recordings will be available shortly, and we'll share that with you when they're available. And in addition to the mentorship program, we want to remind you that from us, we're going to be submitting a survey out for you sometime next week, likely Monday. And it's really important that you fill that out for us to give us the feedback so we make sure that these sessions are as impactful and informative as we intend for them to be. And then finally, I just want to reiterate our thanks. So I want to thank again our speakers, our panelists, our moderators who would have supported us today. And I want to really give a special thank you to our partners for the Scale to Resilience team, YAPA, Gabo Capital, Alliance Biodiversity International, and of course, Global Affairs Canada. I want to give a special shout out to Benedict, who would have been working with us tirelessly over the last few weeks from YAPA. She really, all the speakers, all the participants, at some point in time during this, you interacted with Benedict. So we want to give her thanks for that. And I want to give one special shout out to one of our former colleagues, Nayata Tate, who, although she's no longer with IDB Lab, this eco-micro program was literally something that she was managing for the last few years. And she even started some of the organization for this panel here today. And that is it for me. Again, thank you for attending. We wish you a pleasant rest of your Friday. And we will be following up with all of the housekeeping afterwards. So that's it for me.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great start to the weekend and a great end of your Friday. We'll be seeing you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Enjoy.